In the heart of East Harlem, during an era when the sidewalk was the boardroom and a cigar was a scepter, there sat a man in a white undershirt and a fedora who held the keys to New York City's skyline. To the FBI, he was the boss of bosses, the most powerful racketeer in America, and the face of the Genovese crime family. But behind the smoke of his ever-present cigar lay one of the most elaborate deceptions in the history of organized crime, a secret that would eventually lead to the most significant mafia trial of the century. This is not just a story of crime, it is a masterclass in shadow play, power, and the ultimate price of being the world's most famous decoy. Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno did not look like a corporate titan. He looked like a caricature of a mobster, often seen perched on a folding chair outside the Palma Boys social club. He was a product of the 116th Street crew, a gritty, old-school faction of the Genovese family that prioritized silence and street-level dominance. While other mobsters were chasing the neon lights of Las Vegas or the glitz of Hollywood, Salerno remained rooted in the neighborhood where he was born. His power was built on the numbers. Long before the state lottery existed, the poor and the hopeful of Harlem played the illegal numbers game. Salerno controlled this industry with an iron fist, turning pennies and nickels into a multi-million-dollar empire. He was the bank, the judge, and the jury for the local rackets. By the 1960s, his influence had expanded into loan sharking and labor racketeering, but he remained a man of the people, at least the people who paid him on time. He was a billionaire in a fedora, ruling over a kingdom of concrete and secrets. If you look at the iconic Manhattan skyline, the skyscrapers that define the 20th century, you are looking at the legacy of Fat Tony Salerno. He was a founding member of what became known as the Concrete Club. In the 1980s, you couldn't pour a single yard of concrete for a high-rise building in New York City worth more than $2 million without the approval of the mafia. Salerno and his associates controlled the labor unions and the supply chains. They rigged the bids for massive projects, including the construction of the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center and even the foundations of Trump Tower. Every developer had to pay a mob tax. If they refused, the trucks stopped rolling, the unions went on strike, and the projects died. Salerno wasn't just a criminal, he was an unofficial architect of the city, siphoning off a percentage of every brick and beam that went into the air. This wasn't just street crime, it was an invisible government that sat at the table with the city's most powerful elite. The most fascinating aspect of Salerno's career was the role he played within his own family. Throughout the 1980s, law enforcement and the media identified Fat Tony as the official boss of the Genovese family. He was the one featured on the cover of Fortune magazine as the top gangster in the country. He accepted the title, the prestige, and the target on his back. However, the reality was far more complex. The true power behind the Genovese family was Vincent the Chin Gigante, a man who famously wandered the streets of Greenwich Village in a bathrobe, pretending to be mentally ill to avoid prosecution. Salerno was acting as the front boss. He was the lightning rod designed to draw the heat from the FBI, allowing the real administration to operate in total silence. Salerno was powerful, yes, but he was also a high-level distraction. He played the part perfectly, sitting in the Palma Boys Club, holding court and talking into hidden FBI microphones, while the real decisions were being whispered in dark hallways elsewhere. The downfall of Fat Tony Salerno began not with a gunfight, but with a tiny electronic device. The FBI managed to plant a listening device inside the Palma Boys Social Club, tucked away in the very room where Salerno discussed the inner workings of the Mafia Commission. For months, federal agents listened to the boss discuss everything from fixing elections in the Teamsters Union to ordering hits on rivals. Salerno, believing he was untouchable in his own neighborhood, spoke with startling candor. These recordings became the backbone of the Mafia Commission trial, a landmark case led by a young U.S. attorney named Rudy Giuliani. For the first time, the heads of the 5 families were being tried together as a single criminal enterprise. The evidence against Salerno was overwhelming. The man who had spent his life dodging the law by ruling from a sidewalk chair was finally trapped by his own voice. In 1986,
the world watched as the titans of the American mafia were paraded into court. Salerno, then in his mid-70s, showed little emotion. He remained the tough guy to the end, never breaking his code of silence. When the jury returned their verdict, it was a total victory for the government. Salerno was convicted on all counts of racketeering and conspiracy. The judge handed down a sentence of 100 years in prison, essentially a life sentence for a man of his age. Even as he was led away, the truth about his role as a front boss was only just beginning to leak out. In a strange twist of fate, Salerno was convicted as the boss, even though the mafia insiders knew he was only the underboss at the time. He took the fall for a position he didn't technically hold, maintaining the deception until the very end.
Fat Tony Salerno spent his final years in a federal medical center for prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. The cigar was gone, the fedora was gone, and the power he once held over the streets of Harlem had vanished. He died in 1992 at the age of 81 following the stroke. His death signaled the end of the golden age of the American mafia. The days of mobsters ruling from social clubs and controlling citywide industries were being dismantled by the RICO Act and modern surveillance. Salerno was one of the last of the old-school bosses, men who were more comfortable in a neighborhood bakery than a corporate boardroom, yet managed to run an empire that rivaled Fortune 500 companies. He remains a legendary figure not just for his crimes, but for the sheer scale of his influence. He was a man who helped build the most famous city in the world, one bag of concrete and one illegal bet at a time. His story is a reminder that in the world of the high-stakes underworld, what you see on the surface is rarely the whole truth. Fat Tony Salerno lived as a king, ruled as a titan, and died as a prisoner, leaving behind a legacy of stone, steel, and a secret that kept the FBI guessing for decades.